Have you ever noticed how emotions control the way we speak, think, and react? Welcome to the Audio University. I'm Sam.
And I'm Emma. In this episode, we're exploring the psychology of emotion and how emotions shape human behavior and emotional intelligence.
This podcast is also for those who want to learn English communication, listening to real conversations, understanding natural expressions, and improving confidence in English.
So you're not just learning psychology, you're also practicing English conversation in a podcast style.
I want you to picture the last time you really truly lost your cool. Maybe it was in traffic, maybe a passive-aggressive email from a coworker, or, maybe it was just a pile of dishes that shouldn't have been there.
The breaking point.
Exactly. And it's not just annoyance, is it? It's that physical snap. Your heart starts hammering against your ribs. Your vision actually feels like it's narrowing, and suddenly you are saying things or typing things that the rational you would never endorse.
It feels like a hostile takeover of your own body.
It does. And it is a takeover.
It's a physiological hijacking, really.
Right. And afterwards, when the dust settles, you sit there wondering, why did I do that? I mean, if we're supposed to be these evolved, rational, intelligent, modern humans, why does our internal hardware feel like it's constantly working against us?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. And the answer is that it's not actually a glitch. It's a feature. It's just a feature designed for a world that hasn't existed for about 50,000 years.
Well, today we are going to try and debug that system. We're diving into a stack of research that bridges the gap between the software of our minds, psychology, and the hardware of our body's physiology. We're pulling from David J. Lieberman's book, Mastering the Mind, and a really dense, fascinating research paper by Beverly Lyles titled Physiology of Emotion.
And the mission here is to connect the dots between those two fields. Because usually we treat emotions as these, abstract, floaty things. But Lyles and Lieberman, they make a hard case. Emotions are biological, mechanical events.
And if you understand the mechanics,
you stop being a passenger and you can start being the driver.
We've got a lot to get through. We're going to talk about the evolutionary mismatch that makes your brain react faster than your mind can even think. We're going to look at the counterintuitive science on why venting your anger might actually be wrecking your heart.
And we'll get into the fascinating social defeat study. It involves mice, but it explains why hobbies and exercise aren't just for fun. They are, quite literally, biological armor against trauma.
But let's start with the hardware. Because reading through Lieberman's work, the biggest takeaway seems to be that we are running ancient software on modern servers. And the compatibility issues are a nightmare.
That is the core of the evolutionary mismatch. Lieberman argues that our emotions aren't irrational. They are hyper-rational for the environment we evolved in. For our ancestors, fear wasn't anxiety about a deadline or public speaking. It was a proximity alarm for a predator. Anger wasn't about a rude comment on social media. It was a massive mobilization of energy to physically fight for survival.
So when I see that rude email and my blood pressure spikes, my body is basically preparing to punch a saber-toothed tiger.
Pretty much, yeah. Your body doesn't know the difference between a threat to your ego and a threat to your life. And this brings us to the mechanism of the hijack. It's entirely a speed issue.
This is the amygdala versus the prefrontal cortex thing, right?
Exactly. Think of the amygdala as the security guard watching the CCTV cameras. It's the threat detector deep in the limbic system. And then you have the prefrontal cortex, which is the CEO.
The boss.
Yeah, that's the part responsible for logic, planning, impulse control, checking the facts.
Ideally, the security guard calls the CEO before locking down the building.
Ideally. But the amygdala processes information in milliseconds. It triggers the fight or flight response, pumping cortisol, diverting blood to the muscles.
All of that.
All of it before the prefrontal cortex has even finished processing what the event actually is.
So my brain is literally faster than my mind.
That's the crux of it. The emotional reaction happens before the conscious thought. By the time your rational brain shows up to the meeting, the amygdala has already flipped the table and set the room on fire.
That explains the regret. It explains the why did I say that moment. But Lyle's research adds another layer to this, right? It's not just about speed, it's about the connection quality between those two parts of the brain. She talks a lot about serotonin.
This is a crucial detail. We usually hear about serotonin in pop culture as the happy chemical. If you have enough, you're happy. If you don't, you're sad. But biologically, it's a regulator. It acts like the cabling between the primitive limbic system and the rational frontal lobes.
So it's like the Wi-Fi signal between the security guard and the CEO.
That's a great analogy. If your serotonin is low, the signal degrades. Lyles cites a study from Passamani and Crockett using fMRI scans. They found that when they artificially lowered serotonin levels in people, the communication between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex just broke down.
The brake pedal, the cortex, couldn't reach the gas pedal, the amygdala.
Exactly. The message just doesn't get through.
This puts a completely different spin on people who have a short fuse. It suggests that aggressive behavior isn't just, a personality flaw or a bad attitude.
Yeah.
It could be a literal bad connection in the hardware.
It's a biological susceptibility. I mean, if that circuit is weak, you are physically less capable of inhibiting that ancient rage response. You're driving a car with cut brake lines.
Okay, so we had this hair trigger hardware, but there was another term that kept popping up in the Lyles paper that I hadn't really dug into before. Interoception.
Interoception is a huge concept in modern neuroscience, and Lyles leans on it heavily. So we have our 5 external senses: sight, sound, touch, and so on. Interoception is the sense of the internal state of the body.
Like a system check.
Right. It's the brainstem monitoring your heart rate, your gut tension, the acidity in your stomach, your breath rate. It's where gut feelings come from.
And does everyone have the same level of this?
No, and that's the problem. People with high anxiety often have heightened interoception. They feel every subtle shift in their physiology, every flutter, every drop in the stomach intensely.
They're hyper-aware of the hardware revving up.
Exactly. And when we feel that shift, that tightness or heat, our instinct is usually to get it out. We want to do something with that energy. We want to vent. I mean, I've always been told, don't bottle it up, let it out.
Sure, that's the classic advice.
And this is where the science in the stat contradicts the pop psychology. Lyles references a study by Kassam and Mendez regarding anger that really challenges the let it out advice.
I'm guessing the ventures didn't fare as well as they thought they would.
Not at all. This study compared people who just felt anger versus people who verbally complained and vented about it to others. The people who ruminated, who kept the story alive by telling it over and over, they showed sustained spikes in cardiovascular stress markers.
So getting it off your chest is actually keeping the stress response active.
It's called stewing. Think about it. Every time you retell the story of the rude waiter or the guy who cut you off, you are re-triggering the amygdala. You are convincing your body that the tiger is still in the room. You're keeping the cortisol flowing.
But we can't just repress it, can we? I mean, just sitting there boiling inside seems unhealthy too.
There is a massive difference between repression and what Lieberman suggests. Repression is ignoring the signal. Lieberman talks about interpretation. He says, thoughts create emotions. This is the pivot from the hardware back to the software.
Okay, let's unpack that, because obviously if a car hits me, that's a real event. I can't interpret my way out of a broken leg.
True, but Lieberman breaks this down into primary versus secondary emotions. And this is a tool every listener needs in their pocket because it changes how you handle the day.
What's the distinction?
Primary emotions are the raw data. A car swerves at you, you feel fear, someone insults you, you feel anger. That is the clean pain. It's unavoidable, it's biological, and it's fast.
And the secondary emotion.
That's the dirty pain. That is the reaction to the reaction. So you feel fear, but then you tell yourself, I'm weak for being scared. Now you feel shame, or you feel sad about a breakup and you think, I'm unlovable, I'll always be alone. Now you're in despair.
We're doubling our own suffering.
We usually suffer more from the secondary emotion than the primary one. The primary emotion, that physiological wave, it usually passes in about 90 seconds if you leave it alone. It's the narrative, the secondary emotion, that keeps it going for hours or days.
So the hack is to stop at the primary. Just say, I am angry, and stop there.
Acknowledge the data, don't write a story about it. My heart is beating fast, I am feeling anger. That allows the wave to crash on the shore and recede. If you start saying, I'm angry because he's a jerk and he always does this, you're building a dam that holds the water in.
But sometimes the environment doesn't let us stop. We have to talk about chronic stress. Because the Lyles paper brings up Robert Sapolsky's work, and honestly, the data on what sustained stress does to the brain is terrifying.
It's a sobering read. Sapolsky is a giant in the field of neuroendocrinology. He details how chronic cortisol exposure is neurotoxic. It literally kills neurons in the hippocampus.
And the hippocampus is memory, right?
Memory, learning, and context. If you fry the hippocampus, you lose the ability to contextualize stress. You forget that the bad thing isn't the only thing. It creates a downward spiral where you are less resilient to future stress because the machinery that helps you cope is actually being damaged.
Wow. However, the Lyles paper offers a glimmer of hope with the social defeat study. This was my favorite part of the research stack because it felt so relatable to the modern workplace, even though it was about mice.
This is the Lehman and Herkenheim experiment. It's incredibly revealing.
Paint the picture for us.
So they took a group of mice and put them in a social defeat scenario. Essentially, they were placed in cages where they were bullied by larger, more aggressive mice.
A toxic environment they couldn't control.
Exactly. Now, one group of mice just crumbled. They developed chronic social defeat stress. They showed immune system failure, depression-like behavior, and immobilization. They just froze and gave up. They couldn't function.
But there was another group that didn't crumble.
The enriched environment group. So before the bullying started, these mice lived in cages with exercise wheels, toys, and novel experiences. They were active and mentally stimulated.
And how did they handle the bullies?
They were resistant, they didn't show the depression or anxiety behaviors, and biologically their brains looked different. The exercise and novelty had fortified a specific area called the infralimbic cortex.
The infralimbic cortex.
Think of it as a shield for the emotional brain. When this area is activated and strong, it effectively blocks the processing of negative emotions. It prevents the stress from becoming trauma.
This is profound, because when we tell people to get a hobby or go for a run or learn a new language, it sounds dismissive. It sounds like distraction.
It does.
But this study suggests those things are actually building biological armor.
Precisely. You are building the neural infrastructure to handle the bad days. You can't control the social defeat, the bad boss, the aggressive driver, the financial stress, but you can control the strength of your infralimbic cortex.
So let's get practical. We've diagnosed the problem. Fast amygdala, rumination, weak serotonin connections. We know the stakes. What are the solutions? How do we hack the system to upgrade our hardware?
We have to look at bottom-up processing. We often try to think our way out of stress. That's top-down. We tell ourselves to calm down. But sometimes the brain is just too noisy. You have to use the body to signal the brain. And the most direct route is the vagus nerve.
I keep hearing about the vagus nerve. It's having a moment in the wellness world. What is it actually doing?
It's the longest cranial nerve running from your brainstem down to your abdomen. It controls the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode. It is the brake pedal. We measure its effectiveness through something called heart rate variability, or HRV.
And we want high variability, right?
Yes. High HRV means your system is flexible. Your heart speeds up slightly when you inhale and slows down when you exhale. It shows you can stress up and calm down quickly. Low HRV is linked to rigidity, anxiety, and stress.
How do we stimulate that manually? How do we press the brake pedal?
The Lyles paper is surprisingly specific here, and it points to nature and sound. It cites data showing that gardening, specifically, reduces cortisol and anxiety significantly more than just relaxing.
There's something about the dirt.
There's something about the engagement with the natural world. And this is wild. Listening to nature sounds increase tolerance of other people.
Wait, so if I'm sick of my coworkers, I should listen to birds chirping?
The data says yes. It regulates arousal. Music does the same thing. I mean, these are external inputs that force the autonomic nervous system to downshift. You are manually pressing the brake pedal because your mind is too busy to do it.
There was also the enactment effect mentioned in the source material.
Yes. This validates the idea of movement. Research shows that acting things out or just moving your body helps process emotion and encode memory. You cannot sit your way out of anxiety. The freeze response is the danger zone. You have to move through it.
That covers the physiological hacks. But we need to circle back to relationships. We started the show talking about snapping at a partner or friend. Lieberman gives a specific tool for stopping that spiral, and it's not just take a deep breath.
It's validation. And I want to be clear, this is the hardest one to do because it goes against our instincts.
When someone is screaming or emotional, our instinct is to correct facts. We want to say, I didn't do that, or you're overreacting, or that's not true.
And that is invalidation. Lieberman warns that invalidation triggers the threat response in the other person. It creates a war. The moment you invalidate their feeling, their amygdala locks down. They cannot hear you.
So what does validation look like in that moment?
Validation is simply saying, I see that you're upset, and I understand why this feels real to you. You aren't agreeing with their facts, you're agreeing with their feelings.
You are acknowledging the reality of the emotion, even if the premise is wrong.
Exactly. When you do that, you lower the threat level in the room. You help their amygdala stand down so their prefrontal cortex can come back online. You literally cannot reason with someone until they feel validated.
That's the key. You have to lower the biological temperature before you can have the logical conversation. If you try to use logic while the temperature is high, you're just pouring gasoline on the fire.
That's it. Logic is the last step, not the first.
We've covered a massive amount of ground here. If we had to synthesize this for the listener, put it all into a coherent package.
The synthesis is that we are biomachines. We have ancient hardware scanning for tigers in an office. We have a tendency to stew in dirty pain, which rots us from the inside out. But we aren't helpless.
Right. We can reframe thoughts to stop secondary emotions. We can use enriched environments, exercise, and novelty to build biological armor. We can use nature to hack the vagus nerve.
It's empowering because it removes the shame. Losing your temper isn't a moral failing, it's a hardware glitch. And we have the manual to upgrade the hardware. It's not about willpower, it's about training.
I love that. It turns it from a character flaw into a project.
Before we go, I want to leave the listener with one final, slightly provocative thought from the Berntson and Rubin research that was included in the stack. It's about selfhood.
This was the concept that trauma interrupts time.
Yes. They found that trauma-extreme negative arousal can interrupt autobiographical memory. It acts like a splice in a film reel. They hypothesized that this inability to integrate the event essentially puts a stop to selfhood at that moment.
You get stuck in time. You stop being you past that point because you can't process the memory.
In a way, yourself is a continuous timeline of memory and connection. When trauma breaks that, you lose a piece of your selfhood. So when we talk about regulation or exercise or therapy or validation, we aren't just trying to feel calm.
We're trying to restart the clock.
We are trying to stitch the timeline back together. We are fighting to reclaim our story and integrate those experiences so we can be whole again.
That is a powerful place to land. It's not just anger management, it's self-preservation in the deepest sense.
It really is.
Thank you for guiding us through the machine today.
Always a pleasure.
And to you listening, go find your enriched environment. Plant a garden, listen to some music, and take care of that hardware. We'll see you in the next deep dive.